They fenced off my disabled brother's therapeutic pool at 5:30 a.m. while he slept inside, then slapped him with a $3,400 violation notice for unauthorized medical equipment. What they didn't know? He'd been quietly documenting war crimes for the Pentagon and had friends in very high places. Picture this: Jake rolling out in his wheelchair, still in his Marine Corps t-shirt, watching his lifeline to pain-free movement get wrapped in orange construction fencing while our HOA president, Monica, stood there with her fake smile and clipboard. The morning dew mixed with my brother's quiet rage as $12,000 of specialized hydrotherapy equipment became an eyesore violation. These suburban tyrants thought they'd found the perfect target, a broken veteran and his unemployed brother. What they missed was that my quiet brother had been making some very official phone calls to Washington, D.C. lately. Monica was about to learn what happens when you mess with the wrong Marine's recovery at dawn. What would you do if someone destroyed your family member's only escape from chronic pain? Drop a comment below because this revenge gets absolutely nuclear. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. My name is Marcus, and 2 years ago, life hit our family like an IED. Mom and Dad were killed by a drunk driver, leaving me and my brother Jake these two modest houses side by side in Cedar Grove, a quiet subdivision in North Carolina where people used to mind their own business. Key phrase there, used to. Jake's always been the smart one. While I was bouncing between construction jobs and trying to figure out my life, he was serving his third tour in Afghanistan, doing what he called classified paperwork. Real secretive about it too, never talked specifics, just said he helped investigate incidents and filed reports. After the folks passed, he'd work from his home office most days, taking these intense video calls behind locked doors. I'd hear him using words like War Crimes Tribunal and NATO protocols. Figured he was just really dedicated to whatever veteran benefits paperwork he was processing. Then, 14 months ago, everything changed. Some insurgent's roadside bomb turned his convoy into twisted metal and screaming chaos. Jake spent 8 months in military hospitals, another 6 in VA physical therapy, learning to navigate life with a spinal injury that left his legs mostly useless. Those sterile hospital corridors and the constant beeping of machines became our new normal. The smell of antiseptic and the sound of wheelchairs on linoleum still makes my stomach turn. When he was finally ready to come home, I knew exactly what needed to happen. Spent 6 weeks researching and installing the most advanced therapeutic pool system insurance would cover. Heated saltwater with resistance jets, specialized railings, even a mechanical lift system. The satisfying hum of the filtration system and the gentle lapping of therapeutic water gave him back something the war had stolen. Moments without pain. Cost me $15,000 out of pocket, but watching him move freely in that water for the first time since his injury, priceless. I filed all the proper permits with the county. Got approved in 3 weeks. Figured the HOA notification was automatic because apparently I still believed in common sense back then. Enter Monica Brennan, the human equivalent of a root canal. This 42-year-old real estate agent moved here from some gated community 5 years ago, treating Cedar Grove like her personal homeowner's prison experiment. Her husband divorced her 8 months back, shocking absolutely no one who's watched her measure sidewalk chalk art with a tape measure. The woman fined the Martinez family for having a basketball hoop that was apparently 6 inches too close to the street. 6 inches. You know the type, always wearing power suits like she's running for mayor of a subdivision that doesn't want her. Driving that spotless white BMW that's never seen actual work. She's got this condescending tone that makes everything sound like you're personally disappointing her mother, and shark eyes that only light up when she's crushing someone's dreams. The morning of the pool siege, I discovered Jake never received the HOA architectural review notice. They'd sent it to 847 Pine Street instead of 874 Pine Street. Simple mistake, right? Wrong. Monica claimed it was willful disregard for community standards and refused the standard 45-day grace period for retroactive approval. Military service doesn't exempt anyone from following rules, she sneered, standing there with her clipboard like some wannabe general. The sound of construction fencing being unrolled mixed with my brother's quiet breathing as he watched his recovery space get cordoned off like a crime scene. She actually had the audacity to hand him a violation notice while he sat there in his wheelchair, explaining that therapeutic pools violated the residential character of our neighborhood. Then came the daily fines, $150 every single day until the health hazard was removed. Here's what really twisted the knife. Jake just took it. My fierce Marine brother, who used to debate military strategy with colonels, just sat there nodding, asking quietly about payment plans. I thought the explosion had broken more than his spine. What I didn't know was that he was making very different phone calls now. Real quiet conversations behind his office door, speaking in this authoritative military language I'd never heard him use before. He'd mentioned Pentagon oversight and federal compliance, but I figured he was researching veterans' rights lawyers. Poor Monica had no idea she'd just picked a fight with the wrong family. 72 hours later, Monica showed up at our door like a loan shark collecting debts. But this time, she brought backup. Her buddy Richard, some sleazy attorney who looked like he learned his trade from late-night TV commercials. The guy's cologne was so strong it could have stripped paint, and his polyester suit practically crackled with static electricity as he strutted up our walkway. "Marcus, Jake," Monica said with this predatory grin that made me want to rearrange her face, "we need to discuss your compliance issues." The compliance issues? My brother was trapped away from his only pain relief because this power-drunk wannabe dictator had fenced off his therapeutic pool. Richard pulled out this thick stack of papers, the crisp sound of legal documents rustling in the morning air. "You owe the Homeowners Association $4,200 in fines and administrative fees," he announced like he was delivering someone's lottery winnings. "Pay up in 96 hours or we place a lien on both properties." But wait, it gets better. These geniuses claimed my county-approved permits were fraudulent since I didn't get HOA approval first. Fraudulent, like I was running some kind of illegal swimming pool crime syndicate. Monica actually threatened to report us to the county for health code violations while standing next to the man who needed that pool to function without screaming pain. The sheer audacity would have been impressive if it wasn't so disgusting. That's when something clicked in my brain. See, I've been dealing with bureaucrats my whole life through construction work, and my old foreman used to say something that stuck with me. When someone's throwing rules at you like confetti, check if they're following the same damn rules themselves. So that night, while Jake was on another one of his mysterious calls, this time I heard him mention something about international tribunal protocols, I took a little trip to county records. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I dug through public documents, the musty smell of old filing cabinets filling my nostrils. And what do you know? Our girl Monica had fast-tracked her own hot tub installation 6 months ago. Not only did she skip the architectural review, but her precious spa violated noise ordinances by running the pumps during restricted hours. The woman had literally broken the exact same rules she was crucifying us for, except her violation was actually against county code, too. I remembered reading somewhere that when HOAs enforce rules selectively like this, they can actually lose their legal authority entirely. Something about equal protection under North Carolina law that makes their whole enforcement power null and void. But it gets even juicier. I found 4 other cases where residents had similar oversights with HOA approvals. Every single one got a 45-day grace period to file retroactive paperwork. Every single one except us. The pattern was clear as day. Monica enforced rules like a drunk referee, selectively and vindictively. Mrs. Chen got approval for her garden shed 2 months late. No fines. The Thompson family added a deck without any permits at all. Got a friendly reminder letter. But us? Construction fencing at dawn. When I confronted Jake with my findings, he just smiled this mysterious smile and said, "That's very interesting, Marcus. Very interesting indeed." Then he disappeared into his office for another one of those hushed phone conversations. I caught fragments through the door. Systematic targeting and federal oversight requirements. I figured he was finally calling those veterans' rights lawyers, but something about his tone sounded less like a victim seeking help and more like someone conducting official business. Meanwhile, the neighborhood was watching this whole drama unfold like some twisted reality show. Mrs. Patterson had started documenting everything from her front porch, probably building enough evidence to write a book. Tom from the hardware store dropped by with pool chemicals and an offer to help maintain the system for free. "That Brennan woman's been targeting half the neighborhood," he muttered. "Someone needs to knock her down a peg." Even got an anonymous note slipped under our door. "Others have been harassed too. You're not fighting alone." Someone was building a resistance movement in Cedar Grove, and we were apparently the poster children. But Monica wasn't done flexing her imaginary muscles. The daily fines kept accumulating like interest on a loan shark's debt. We were up to $2,000 and climbing. She even filed a formal complaint with county health inspectors trying to get the pool declared a public nuisance over standing water concerns. The irony? While she was busy trying to destroy my brother's recovery, he was sitting in his wheelchair, methodically building what looked like the world's most comprehensive case file. Every conversation documented, every interaction recorded, every legal precedent researched. He worked with the focused intensity of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Just let the system work. He'd tell me when I got too fired up. What none of us realized yet was that Jake wasn't just building a defense. He was preparing to drop a nuclear bomb on Monica Brennan's little kingdom. 2 weeks later, Monica orchestrated what can only be described as a public execution disguised as an HOA meeting. The community center reeked of stale coffee and industrial carpet cleaner as 50-plus residents filed in. The buzz of fluorescent lights overhead adding to the tension like we were about to witness a gladiator match. She'd set up this whole theatrical presentation, complete with a PowerPoint slideshow titled Maintaining Health and Safety Standards, because apparently humiliating disabled veterans requires professional graphics. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Monica began, clicking through photos of our violating pool with the enthusiasm of a wildlife photographer showing off trophy kills. We're here tonight to discuss the consequences of ignoring established health protocols. The projectors fan whirred as she displayed before and after shots of Jake's backyard, calling his therapeutic pool an unauthorized health hazard and a liability nightmare for the community. Health hazard. The thing was built to medical specifications with safety features that would have impressed a hospital administrator. But here's where it got really ugly. She actually said, and I quote, "Some residents seem to think military service gives them special privileges to endanger their neighbors' property values." The way she emphasized some residents while staring directly at Jake made my blood pressure spike to dangerous levels. He sat there in his wheelchair, taking notes with this eerily calm expression, like he was studying a particularly fascinating species of venomous snake. That's when I stood up with my own little surprise. See, I'd spent the past 2 weeks doing more than just feeling sorry for myself. I'd been channeling my inner investigator. The satisfying click of my laptop opening echoed through the suddenly quiet room as I revealed photo after photo of Monica's noise ordinance violations. "Funny thing about rules, Monica," I said, letting each word hang in the air like smoke. "They work both ways." The sharp intake of breath from the audience was music to my ears. I laid out the whole pattern like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. 4 other residents with similar permit oversights, all granted retroactive approval except us. Mrs. Chen's shed, the Thompson's deck, even old Mr. Valdez's koi pond that was technically violating a drainage easement. Every single one got the friendly treatment while we got the construction fence express. I remembered something my construction law instructor used to say. When associations pick and choose which rules to enforce, they're basically admitting the rules don't actually matter, which can void their entire authority structure under state law. But Monica, slick as a politician during election season, had prepared for this possibility. My spa installation was pre-approved through verbal consultation with the previous board, she claimed, producing exactly 0 documentation to support this convenient memory lapse. Then she pulled out her ace card, 3 property developers who'd been quietly buying up houses in the neighborhood, all suddenly very interested in maintaining upscale standards. These vultures wanted Cedar Grove gentrified faster than a Starbucks opening in a small town. The motion to table discussion pending legal review passed 8-6, with Monica's developer buddies providing the swing votes like a rigged poker game. But that wasn't enough for our wannabe dictator. As her final power move, she announced that daily fines were increasing to $300 as an emergency health measure. The sound of that gavel hitting the podium felt like a judge sentencing us to financial execution. That's when something beautiful and terrifying happened. Jake wheeled himself up to the microphone for the first time since this whole nightmare began. His voice was steady, almost conversational, as he spoke about service and federal oversight of community organizations. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet veteran casually mentioning how interesting it was that associations accepting federal funding had to comply with disability rights laws. He asked pointed questions about parliamentary procedure and grant compliance that made Monica's left eye start twitching like she'd developed a nervous condition. After the meeting, the neighborhood dynamics shifted like tectonic plates. Several residents approached Jake, sharing their own harassment stories in hushed conspiratorial tones. Mrs. Rodriguez whispered about being fined for unauthorized wind chimes. Apparently, decorative noise was now a threat to community stability. The young Kim family mentioned threats over their children's sidewalk chalk art, because nothing says property values like criminalizing childhood creativity. That night, a Facebook group called Cedar Grove Community Defense appeared and gained 150 members by morning. Mrs. Patterson had been busy building a digital resistance network while documenting everything through her window. Even Lisa from our local paper started sniffing around, asking uncomfortable questions about HOA finances that made Monica's power suit seem to shrink a size. Meanwhile, our fines climbed past $2,700, and Monica hired private security to patrol like we were living under martial law. But every night, behind his closed office door, Jake continued those mysterious phone calls with an authority that would have impressed a Pentagon general. What I didn't realize was that my quiet brother wasn't just fighting back. He was positioning pieces on a chessboard that existed in dimensions Monica couldn't even imagine. 3 days after the meeting, Monica crossed the line from petty tyrant to full-blown psychopath. I woke up to find a county inspector red-tagging Jake's house for accessibility non-compliance, the same house that needed the pool these monsters had fenced off. The inspector looked like he wanted to disappear into the pavement as he explained that someone had filed a complaint claiming the house violated occupancy requirements for disabled residents. The irony was so thick you could have choked on it, but that was just the opening act. Monica had somehow convinced a judge to grant her a restraining order against me for harassment and intimidation. Apparently, presenting evidence of her violations at a public meeting now constituted stalking in her twisted universe. The sheriff serving the papers looked embarrassed, the smell of fresh legal ink mixing with his obvious discomfort as he mumbled apologies about paperwork games and lawyers run amok. The restraining order was pure fiction, claims about threatening phone calls and menacing behavior that read like a bad movie script. I couldn't come within 200 feet of Monica or any HOA property, effectively banning me from half my own neighborhood. Meanwhile, she was spreading poison faster than a medieval plague, telling anyone who'd listen that we were professional victims seeking lawsuit settlements, funded by radical veteran organizations trying to destroy traditional communities. That's when my construction background saved my neck again. Years of dealing with bureaucratic systems taught me that when someone's flinging legal papers like confetti, you follow the money trail. So while Jake took another mysterious call, this time discussing Pentagon oversight protocols with the authority of someone who actually understood military bureaucracy, I went hunting for Monica's financial secrets. What I found made my blood run cold. Her ex-husband's landscaping company had been awarded every single HOA maintenance contract for 2 years straight. $40,000 for landscaping that should have cost $12,000. 2 emergency tree removals at $6,000 each when Tom's crew would have done it for $800 total. A fountain repair requiring $18,000 in specialized equipment to basically replace a pump. This wasn't just price gouging. This was systematic theft wrapped in official paperwork. I remembered reading about these kickback schemes in trade magazines where officials create inflated contracts and pocket the difference, which constitutes fraud that can trigger federal racketeering charges when it involves government grants. When I showed Jake the evidence, his smile turned positively predatory. "That's extremely valuable information, Marcus," he said with the satisfaction of someone confirming a theory rather than learning something new. Then came another call, this time mentioning federal fraud investigations and NATO tribunal protocols like he was coordinating with international law enforcement rather than researching legal options. The neighborhood had transformed into something resembling occupied territory. Security cameras sprouted on Monica's property like mechanical mushrooms, their red eyes tracking our every movement. Private guards made wellness checks twice daily, intimidation tactics disguised as community safety. The rhythmic thud of their boots on concrete became our soundtrack of oppression. She even tried having Jake's medical equipment delivery intercepted, claiming it blocked emergency vehicle access on our own driveway. But here's what really twisted the knife. She pressured neighbors to file noise complaints about Jake's wheelchair. His wheelchair. The sound of someone trying to navigate their own home was apparently disturbing the peace. Mrs. Chen actually apologized while filing the complaint, whispering that Monica threatened to fine her for pet violations if she didn't cooperate. The woman had turned our entire community into her personal police state. Yet somehow, Jake seemed to grow stronger with each attack. While neighbors scurried past our house like we had something contagious, he methodically requested HOA financial records under state transparency laws, asking surgical questions about federal grant compliance that made board members sweat through their power suits. His office had evolved into something resembling a war room, with spreadsheets tracking every violation and legal documents organized with military precision. The fines climbed past $3,900, accumulating like interest on a devil's bargain. Monica filed complaints with state licensing boards, trying to destroy my construction career over fraudulent applications. Every sunrise brought fresh legal harassment, but every sunset brought those cryptic phone calls where Jake mentioned The Hague and international protocols like he was coordinating operations with global agencies. Mrs. Patterson's documentation captured Monica conducting midnight property inspections with a flashlight, prowling around like some demented suburban ghost. Tom offered to accidentally back a concrete truck into her, but I knew we had to stay clean. The woman was trying to provoke us into something stupid that would justify her legal crusade. What I didn't understand yet was that every harassment incident, every fraudulent document, every abuse of power was being cataloged by someone who knew exactly how to weaponize this evidence. Monica thought she was crushing neighborhood troublemakers, but she was actually documenting her own federal crimes, one vindictive act at a time. The prey was about to become the predator, and the hunter had no idea she was already in the crosshairs. The moment that changed everything happened because I'm nosy and don't respect privacy. I was bringing Jake his afternoon medication, the familiar sound of his keyboard clicking away, when I walked straight into his video conference. The screen showed something that made my brain completely malfunction. Colonel Jacob Morrison, War Crimes Investigation Unit in official Pentagon letterhead, with my wheelchair-bound brother speaking with the authority of someone who actually ran international military tribunals. I stood there like a deer in headlights, pill bottle frozen halfway to the desk, watching my quiet veteran brother casually discuss NATO protocols with a room full of high-ranking officers who kept calling him Colonel and Sir. The taste of shock turned bitter in my mouth as I realized I'd been treating a Pentagon war crimes investigator like he needed my protection to handle a neighborhood bully. "Marcus," he said calmly, turning from the screen with that mysterious smile finally making perfect sense. "We should probably talk." The truth hit me like a missile to the brain. Jake had been a high-ranking military investigator this entire time, working remotely since his injury to continue coordinating international war crimes tribunals. While I thought he was researching veterans' lawyers, he'd been coordinating with federal investigators. Those mysterious phone calls about protocols and oversight. He wasn't learning about government processes, he was running them. "You've been investigating war crimes?" I croaked out, feeling like the world's most spectacular fool. "International Military Tribunal Coordinator," he confirmed with maddening calm, while my entire worldview collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. "And before you ask, yes, I've been fully aware that Monica's little kingdom received $340,000 from federal community development grants last year." The power shift was so dramatic I got dizzy. We hadn't been helpless victims getting steamrolled by a petty dictator. We'd been holding a nuclear weapon while she threw pebbles. The woman had systematically harassed someone who coordinated with international courts, completely oblivious that she was attacking someone who could end her entire operation with a phone call. "Every federal dollar flowing to housing associations requires Pentagon oversight for veteran compliance," Jake continued, the authority in his voice now making perfect sense. "The grant agreement mandates full ADA compliance and anti-harassment measures. Monica hasn't just been violating civil rights, she's been breaching international protocols while documenting her own war crimes." He pulled up files revealing months of meticulous evidence gathering, not just for our case, but for systematic abuse patterns across multiple states. The Department of Defense was already building investigations based on his documentation, targeting 23 problematic HOAs receiving veteran-related federal funding. This wasn't about personal revenge, it was about creating legal precedent to protect vulnerable veterans everywhere. "Why the hell didn't you tell me?" I demanded, waves of relief and fury crashing together in my chest. "I've been losing sleep for months thinking we were powerless." "Because your genuine outrage was essential," he explained, his strategic instincts showing through. "Your authentic anger built the community support we needed. Plus, I wanted to document exactly how far these small-time tyrants will go when they think they're attacking defenseless people." The beautiful irony made me want to laugh and cry simultaneously. Monica had been creating her own prosecution file, methodically documenting federal violations while thinking she was teaching troublemakers a lesson. Civil rights violations, grant fraud, systematic harassment, all committed against a Pentagon tribunal coordinator who'd been taking detailed notes. "So what happens now?" I asked, still processing that my brother had been playing chess on a board I couldn't even see. Jake's smile turned absolutely savage, the look of someone about to enjoy delivering justice with international backing. "Now we show Ms. Brennan what real military precision actually looks like." What I thought was my brother's home office turned out to be a command center that would have made NORAD's mission control look like a lemonade stand. Maps covered one wall showing 23 problematic HOAs across the southeast, each marked with colored pins like a military intelligence operation. A whiteboard tracked federal grant violations with the obsessive detail of someone plotting a major offensive, and enough secure communication equipment to run a small war lined his desk. The hum of encrypted Pentagon channels mixed with the smell of fresh coffee and impending justice. "Welcome to the war room," Jake said with a grin that could have lit up the Pentagon. "Hope you're ready to see how real military power operates." The allies he'd assembled made our neighborhood resistance look like kids playing army. Captain Patricia Vance, who I thought was just a veterans' rights lawyer taking pity on us, turned out to be on the Pentagon's rapid response team for veteran rights violations. Lisa, our local reporter, had been investigating HOA abuse nationwide as part of a coordinated media strategy that reached all the way to the Department of Defense press office. Even Mrs. Patterson's obsessive documentation was part of an evidence-gathering operation sophisticated enough to impress international prosecutors. "The legal strategy is beautiful in its simplicity," Patricia explained, spreading documents like she was dealing cards in the world's most expensive poker game. "Federal grant recipients must maintain veteran accommodation and anti-harassment procedures. When they systematically violate these requirements, we trigger both civil rights enforcement and international treaty violations." The irony was delicious. Monica's own federal funding had created the legal framework for her destruction, like handing someone the rope to hang themselves with detailed instructions. The financial investigation read like a masterclass in military-grade forensic accounting. Jake's Pentagon analysts, paid for with federal resources, naturally had uncovered fraud that would have impressed organized crime investigators. $280,000 in questionable expenses over 2 years, with Monica's ex-husband charging prices that made defense contractors look reasonable. emergency tree removals at $6,000 each when any reasonable person would have called Tom and his chainsaw for $800 total. A fountain repair requiring $18,000 in specialized equipment rental to replace what was essentially a decorative pump. "Here's something most people don't realize," Patricia said, pointing to federal grant fine print that looked like it was written by lawyers who specialized in international law. "When organizations receiving federal veteran funding engage in systematic harassment, individual board members face personal liability under both domestic civil rights law and international treaty obligations." She paused for dramatic effect, probably savoring the legal poetry. Monica isn't just facing organizational penalties, she's looking at personal financial ruin and potential international sanctions that could follow her for decades. The media coordination was more choreographed than a military parade. Lisa had spent weeks coordinating with Pentagon Press Corps, timing releases for maximum news cycle impact during Veteran Appreciation Month. A documentary filmmaker specializing in veteran rights abuses had positioned cameras around our neighborhood like we were filming the next great American justice story. Social media campaigns waited with hashtags like Kajashar Veteran Rights and Jashagajasho Accountability ready to launch simultaneously with legal filings for that perfect storm of public outrage. Community organizing had evolved from Tom's after-hours hardware store meetings into something resembling a civilian intelligence network. 31 families had documented harassment with Pentagon-quality evidence files, complete with timestamps that would have made military court reporters weep with joy. Mrs. Patterson's security camera network provided surveillance coverage that could have detected a mosquito landing on Monica's precious BMW. "Technical preparation is where Pentagon resources really shine," Jake explained, showing me communication systems that looked like they belonged in spy thrillers. Legal documents were prepared for simultaneous filing across multiple jurisdictions, press packets ready for instant distribution, and backup plans for contingencies including Monica attempting to flee or destroy evidence. The Department of Defense IT department had provided secure channels that made our previous Facebook group look like sending smoke signals. My role transformation from panicked brother to community organizer had been perfect cover for a sophisticated Pentagon operation. I'd unknowingly become the authentic face of grassroots resistance while learning enough veteran rights law to help other families navigate their harassment situations. The beautiful irony was that my genuine outrage had provided ideal camouflage for what was essentially a federal military investigation. Psychological preparation involved media training that turned affected residents into effective witnesses, legal coaching for complex federal procedures, and stress management for the upcoming public confrontation. Jake practiced returning to public speaking after months of strategic privacy, while Pentagon attorneys prepared intervention protocols if Monica attempted witness intimidation. Intelligence gathering had revealed this wasn't Monica's first rodeo. Background checks showed similar schemes at her previous Florida community, where she'd been quietly forced out after financial irregularities that followed patterns identical to our situation. Pending lawsuits in other states suggested a career built on exploiting legal loopholes and terrorizing residents who couldn't fight back. "The timeline reads like a military operation," Jake said, pointing to schedules that would have impressed NATO planners. 2 weeks to complete evidence collection, 1 week for coordinated legal filings, then public revelation at Monica's own emergency meeting where she plans to humiliate us. The perfect trap. Monica orchestrating her own public execution while thinking she was finally crushing the neighborhood troublemakers. Monica's desperation reached new heights when she called an emergency HOA meeting to vote on a $600 monthly special assessment for every household. The woman was literally trying to tax the neighborhood into funding her legal defense against our frivolous lawsuit, like some kind of feudal lord demanding tribute from peasants who dared question her authority. The meeting notice gave residents exactly 72 hours to prepare, barely legal under North Carolina HOA laws, but typical Monica operating procedure when she wanted to ram something through before people could organize opposition. "We need immediate funds for legal defense and community protection," she announced to anyone who'd listen, her voice carrying that condescending whine that made fingernails on chalkboards sound melodic. The smell of her desperation mixed with too much perfume as she canvassed the neighborhood like a politician promising everything and delivering nothing. She claimed our attacks on community standards threatened everyone's property values, conveniently ignoring that her own corruption had already scared away 3 potential buyers who'd heard about the neighborhood drama. But financial warfare was just her opening move. The sabotage escalated to levels that would have impressed Cold War operatives. Contractors mysteriously damaged our water line during routine maintenance, flooding our yard and creating a muddy mess that made wheelchair navigation impossible. The smell of chlorinated water and diesel fuel from their equipment lingered for days while they took their sweet time with repairs that should have taken hours. Then came the power outage that magically affected only our block during a heat wave, leaving us without air conditioning while Jake's medical equipment ran on backup batteries. The electric company claimed it was scheduled maintenance they'd somehow forgotten to notify residents about, despite Mrs. Patterson's security cameras clearly showing utility trucks arriving after the outage began. Even our mail delivery got mysteriously delayed whenever important legal documents were expected, forcing us to drive to the post office like we lived in some third-world dictatorship. My visible countermoves had to look desperate while actually serving Jake's master plan. I organized petition drives against the special assessment, going door to door with the righteous anger of someone who didn't know his brother controlled military tribunals. Those community meetings at Tom's hardware store grew to 40-plus attendees, with residents sharing horror stories that would have made a documentary about suburban tyranny. Every harassment incident got documented with timestamps and photos, creating an evidence file that Pentagon prosecutors would later call disturbingly comprehensive. The character assassination campaign reached levels of creativity that almost impressed me. Monica spread rumors about Jake's fake disability based on absolutely nothing except her own paranoid fantasies. She suggested I was exploiting my brother's condition for personal gain, apparently unaware that calling a Pentagon tribunal coordinator a faker was the kind of stupidity that gets people investigated by multiple federal agencies. Her masterpiece was claiming we were outside agitators funded by radical veteran organizations. Technically true if you count the Department of Defense as radical, which Monica probably did. Meanwhile, Jake's silent preparation reached military precision levels. Pentagon investigators had been gathering evidence for weeks under the cover of routine grant compliance reviews that Monica welcomed with the enthusiasm of someone who thought she was getting commended. Federal veteran rights attorneys prepared intervention protocols that would make Monica's restraining order look like a parking ticket. Press materials sat ready for coordinated release that would hit every major news outlet simultaneously. The community resistance had evolved into something beautiful. Mrs. Patterson's security footage revealed Monica conducting late-night sabotage activities with all the stealth of a drunk rhinoceros, providing evidence that would later support criminal charges. Lisa's articles in the local paper exposed financial irregularities with surgical precision, each story building public pressure like a slowly tightening noose. The Facebook group had grown to 500 members sharing abuse stories that painted a picture of systematic oppression worthy of federal intervention. But Monica's paranoid behavior was providing the most damaging evidence. She'd hired private investigators to follow me like I was some kind of international spy, creating surveillance records that demonstrated the extent of her harassment campaign. Her attempts to access our financial records through official HOA business violated multiple privacy laws while generating paper trails that prosecutors would use to establish criminal intent. The legal pressure was mounting from directions Monica couldn't even see. Patricia's injunction against the special assessment was just the opening move in a coordinated legal assault involving Pentagon auditors, federal investigators, and international treaty enforcement attorneys. The Department of Justice had opened a formal review based on our veteran discrimination complaint, while military prosecutors examined potential criminal charges for grant fraud that could land Monica in federal prison. Financial discovery had revealed the full scope of her theft. $340,000 in questionable HOA expenses, with her ex-husband's company receiving inflated contracts totaling $280,000 over 2 years. Board members had received consulting fees that looked suspiciously like hush money, while federal grant funds appeared to have financed personal expenses, including Monica's BMW payments. The beautiful trap was that every desperate move Monica made created more evidence for her eventual prosecution. She thought she was fighting neighborhood troublemakers, but she was actually documenting federal crimes while a Pentagon tribunal coordinator took detailed notes. Monica's final gambit was scheduling what she grandly called a community safety meeting at City Hall, complete with formal invitations to the mayor, city council, and local media. The woman actually thought she was orchestrating her moment of triumph, planning to present irrefutable evidence of our disruptive behavior before expelling us from HOA common areas permanently. Her invitation list read like she was hosting a political rally, complete with her contractor partners invited to witness what she called her decisive victory over troublemakers. The smear campaign reached levels of creativity that bordered on performance art. Flyers appeared throughout the neighborhood claiming Jake had a documented history of violent instability, completely fabricated but printed on official-looking letterhead that gave it fake credibility. She suggested I was a professional victim seeking lawsuit settlements, apparently unaware that accusing the brother of a Pentagon tribunal coordinator of fraud was the kind of stupidity that gets people audited by military intelligence for the rest of their natural lives. The crown jewel was her theory that we were outside agitators funded by radical military organizations trying to destroy traditional family values, because nothing says traditional values like fencing off disabled veterans' medical equipment at dawn. My final visible preparations had to maintain the illusion that we were desperate underdogs making a last stand. I coordinated with 40-plus supporters to attend the meeting, preparing an emotional presentation about harassment timelines that would have made a jury weep. Character witnesses included Jake's former commanding officers, our pastor, and neighbors brave enough to speak truth to petty power. The plan was for me to deliver a heartfelt appeal about my brother's dignity while he sat quietly in his wheelchair, looking like the vulnerable victim Monica thought she was destroying. But behind the scenes, Jake's shadow coordination had reached the sophistication of a Pentagon operation. Military intelligence investigators positioned themselves throughout the expected audience, ready to serve federal subpoenas the moment legal immunity expired. Media packets had been distributed to Defense Department press corps with embargo dates timed for maximum impact. Federal veteran rights attorneys prepared to intervene if Monica attempted witness intimidation, while backup security stood ready for potential confrontation. Monica's overconfidence was so complete it approached clinical delusion. She believed her minor political connections, a county commissioner, a city councilman, and a state representative's aide, would support her against what she saw as welfare veterans and troublemakers. Her contractor partners arrived early to witness what they thought would be a masterclass in community leadership. The woman had even prepared a victory speech about protecting community standards that she planned to deliver after our public humiliation. Community mobilization had transformed Tom's Hardware store into resistance headquarters, with supporters carpooling to the meeting like they were attending a revolution. Mrs. Patterson coordinated neighborhood logistics with the efficiency of someone organizing a military deployment. Lisa arranged live streaming equipment for immediate social media distribution, while the documentary filmmaker positioned cameras to capture what she sensed would be historic footage. The legal trap had reached completion with surgical precision. All harassment incidents were documented with federal agencies. Financial audit results revealed criminal liability for grant fraud, and veteran rights violations had been thoroughly established through months of systematic abuse. Jake had learned something from years in military intelligence that Monica never understood. When you're going to destroy someone, you make absolutely certain they can never recover. Behind-the-scenes maneuvering had reached crescendo levels. Pentagon investigators had interviewed HOA board members who revealed uncomfortable details about Monica's financial schemes under immunity agreements. Federal prosecutors reviewed potential criminal charges that could result in decades of prison time, while media embargoes prepared to lift simultaneously with legal action for maximum public impact. Monica's final harassment escalation provided the perfect evidence for federal prosecution. She threatened to have us arrested for trespassing at a public meeting, apparently unaware that City Hall belongs to taxpayers, not HOA presidents with delusions of grandeur. Claims that we weren't legitimate residents due to violations sounded like segregation-era legal arguments that would horrify federal civil rights attorneys. Her veiled threats about permanent solutions were recorded by multiple devices and would later support criminal conspiracy charges. The psychological buildup was reaching movie-like proportions. Monica exhibited manic confidence that reminded observers of dictators on the eve of revolution, completely oblivious to the forces gathering against her. Marcus appeared visibly stressed and defeated, playing his role perfectly while knowing his brother controlled every aspect of the upcoming confrontation. Community supporters gathered with nervous energy, sensing historic significance without understanding the full scope of what was about to unfold. Technical surveillance had documented pre-meeting intimidation attempts with quality that would have impressed Pentagon investigators. Hidden cameras captured threatening statements that established criminal intent, while live streaming equipment prepared for immediate social media distribution of whatever dramatic events were about to unfold. Professional photography was arranged to document what Jake privately called the end of Monica Brennan's reign of terror. The stage was set for maximum impact revelation, meeting scheduled for 7 p.m. with expected attendance over 120 people, including media representatives who had no idea they were about to witness a Pentagon tribunal coordinator destroying a small-town tyrant in real time. Monica planned a 30-minute presentation exposing the brothers as community threats, completely unaware that her target would be revealing himself as one of the most powerful military investigators in the country. City Hall was packed beyond capacity with 140 residents, media crews, and officials. The air thick with anticipation, and the smell of industrial floor cleaner mixed with nervous sweat. Monica had orchestrated this moment like a dictator planning a propaganda rally, complete with her PowerPoint presentation loaded and ready on the projector. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she adjusted her jacket for the third time, practically vibrating with the confidence of someone who thought she was about to deliver the performance of her lifetime. "Ladies and gentlemen," Monica began with theatrical flourish, her condescending voice echoing through the packed room as she clicked through photos of our violations. "Tonight, we address the cancer that's been eating away at our community safety standards." The projector hummed while she displayed before and after shots of Jake's fenced-off pool, describing it as an unauthorized health hazard that threatened neighborhood property values. Her voice carried the smug satisfaction of someone who thought she was delivering a death blow to troublemakers who dared challenge her authority. She demanded the HOA board vote to permanently ban these disruptive elements from all community spaces, gesturing toward us like a prosecutor pointing at convicted criminals. The woman actually used the phrase, "Some people think military service gives them special privileges to break rules," while staring directly at my brother, apparently oblivious that she was about to learn exactly how military protocols work when you're sitting across from someone who enforces them internationally. That's when I delivered my emotional testimony, playing my role perfectly as the desperate brother fighting for his sibling's dignity. I spoke about watching him struggle upstairs while neighbors pretended not to notice, about daily fines that threatened our family's financial survival, about the systematic harassment that had turned our home into a prison. My voice cracked with genuine emotion as I described the sound of construction fencing being unrolled around his only source of pain relief at dawn, the audience shifting uncomfortably as the human cost of Monica's tyranny became impossible to ignore. Then Mayor Davidson stepped to the microphone with a smile that should have been Monica's first warning that something was terribly wrong. "Before we proceed with tonight's business," he announced with barely contained excitement, "I'd like to introduce a surprise guest who's been following this situation with great interest from a unique perspective." The room fell silent except for the mechanical whir of news cameras turning toward the back entrance. "Please welcome Colonel Jacob Morrison, Pentagon War Crimes Investigation Unit." The audible gasp that swept through the room sounded like air being sucked out of a collapsing building. Monica's face went through a spectrum of colors that would have impressed a chameleon, starting with confusion and rapidly progressing through shock, horror, and what I can only describe as the look of someone realizing they've been juggling live grenades. Media cameras pivoted toward my brother like flowers following sunlight, their electronic flashes creating a strobe effect that made the moment feel surreal. Jake wheeled himself to the microphone with the calm authority of someone who'd been planning this moment for months, wearing his dress uniform that he'd kept hidden until now. "Ms. Brennan," he began in the voice that had delivered testimony to international courts and Pentagon briefings, "you've been systematically harassing a federal military tribunal coordinator for 4 months. I hope the experience has been educational." The room erupted in chaos that would have made a political convention look peaceful. Residents who'd been cowering in fear of HOA retaliation suddenly found their voices, while Monica stood frozen like a deer caught in headlights driven by federal prosecutors. Her mouth opened and closed wordlessly, producing no sound except a strangled whimper that microphones mercifully didn't pick up. "I coordinate $80 million in annual veteran housing grants nationwide," Jake continued with surgical precision, "including the $340,000 your association received last year. Every federal grant you've accepted came with specific requirements for veteran accommodation and anti-harassment measures that you've systematically violated." His words cut through the room like a blade, each sentence another nail in Monica's political coffin. That's when the legal hammer fell with biblical force. Pentagon investigators identified themselves throughout the audience, rising like coordinated dancers to serve federal subpoenas for financial records. Federal marshals presented warrants that had been prepared weeks in advance, while veteran rights attorneys announced class action lawsuits that would make Monica's life a legal nightmare for decades. Military auditors declared emergency investigations into grant compliance that would freeze HOA assets pending criminal review. Monica's meltdown was spectacular in its completeness. She attempted to deny everything, claiming misunderstanding and military retaliation, while security moved closer to contain what looked like an impending psychological break. Her accusations of abuse of power rang hollow in a room filled with residents who'd witnessed months of her systematic harassment. When she started shouting threats about lawsuits and career destruction, security finally removed her as she devolved into incoherent ranting about constitutional rights and government overreach. The community reaction was instantaneous and overwhelming. A standing ovation lasted 7 minutes, with residents who'd been terrorized for months finally free to express their relief and gratitude. HOA board members resigned en masse rather than face federal prosecution, while Mrs. Patterson emerged as unanimous choice for interim president. The Facebook group exploded with celebration posts as news spread beyond our neighborhood to veteran communities across the nation. Within hours, national media picked up the story of a Pentagon coordinator fighting back against discrimination, turning our small-town drama into a symbol of justice triumphing over petty tyranny. 1 week after Monica's spectacular public meltdown, the entire neighborhood gathered for what looked like the world's most therapeutic barn raising. 52 neighbors contributed labor, materials, or enough food to feed a construction battalion as we rebuilt Jake's therapeutic pool system in a single weekend. The sweet smell of fresh concrete mixed with barbecue smoke and the rhythmic symphony of construction tools, creating something beautiful instead of destroying it. Tom donated all the equipment while local electricians handled the technical work, transforming what had been a symbol of discrimination into a neighborhood centerpiece that visitors now stopped to photograph. The legal consequences for Monica unfolded with the relentless precision of military justice: 24 months in federal prison for grant fraud and veteran rights violations, plus 5 years probation and $380,000 in restitution payments that would follow her like a financial shadow. Her ex-husband's company declared bankruptcy, owing the community fund every stolen penny, while their contractors' licenses got permanently revoked faster than you could say, court-martial. The woman slithered out of state after release, but federal conviction records follow you everywhere in the digital age. Community transformation happened so dramatically it made Hollywood endings look realistic. Mrs. Patterson's unanimous election as HOA president ushered in bylaws prioritizing accessibility and veteran support over petty rule enforcement. Monthly community dinners replaced harassment campaigns, with the smell of homemade casseroles and genuine laughter filling the community center where Monica had once orchestrated her tyrannical presentations. Property values increased 18% within 6 months, not because of oppressive regulations, but because people actually wanted to live somewhere known for protecting neighbors instead of terrorizing them. Statewide impact exceeded even Jake's military expectations. Jake's law passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, requiring HOA board training on veteran rights and creating a state ombudsman office with actual enforcement teeth. Whistleblower protections for residents meant future Monicas would face organized resistance instead of isolated victims. The legislation became a model for 21 other states dealing with similar suburban tyranny epidemics. Personal healing became the most beautiful part of this nightmare-turned-triumph. Marcus channeled his protective rage into founding a nonprofit helping veteran families navigate accessibility modifications, working with communities across 5 states to remove barriers and build understanding. Jake's approval ratings within Pentagon circles hit new highs after showing military leadership the kind of strategic thinking they'd hoped for when they promoted him. Their brotherhood emerged stronger than ever, bonded by crisis and seasoned with mutual respect that had been missing during years of Marcus treating him like someone who needed protection instead of someone fully capable of protecting others. The Community Benefit Project transformed stolen federal money into genuine neighborhood improvements. Accessibility upgrades for 18 additional homes created a community where mobility devices moved freely without architectural hostility. The community garden flourished on former violation-prone common areas, producing vegetables and friendships while erasing memories of Monica's midnight enforcement patrols. Annual pool day celebrations now raise funds for disabled veterans nationwide while serving barbecue that attracts visitors from neighboring counties. Media legacy ensured this David versus Goliath story would inspire others facing similar battles. Lisa's investigative series exposed HOA abuse in 31 states, creating accountability ripples that reached federal policy discussions. The Emmy-winning documentary Fenced In became required viewing in military leadership courses, while Cedar Grove transformed into a pilgrimage site for communities fighting their own petty dictators. 1 year later, Jake uses his pool daily, the smooth concrete and therapeutic jets a testament to dignity triumphing over discrimination. The bronze plaque on the equipment housing reads, "In honor of those who stood up," honoring everyone who'd faced down neighborhood tyrants. Marcus runs a thriving nonprofit building accessibility while teaching others that the best revenge is living well and helping others do the same. The sound of children playing in the pool, now the neighborhood's favorite gathering spot, fills the air where construction fencing once brought division. Every morning, the American flag flies over a community that learned the difference between rules that protect and rules that oppress. Mrs. Patterson's security cameras now capture block parties instead of harassment, while Tom's hardware store has become an unofficial community center where neighbors plan improvements instead of plotting resistance. Have you survived HOA nightmare stories that make Monica look reasonable? Share your experience in the comments. You might be surprised how many rights you actually have when dealing with these suburban dictators. Hit subscribe to HOA Stories and ring that notification bell, because next week I'm covering the small-town librarian who discovered her city council was embezzling millions, and her revenge was absolutely legendary. Remember, every bully and petty power counts on you feeling helpless, but there's always someone they answer to, and sometimes that someone has been taking very detailed notes with international backing. Thank you for tuning in to HOA Stories, where neighbors stand up against HOA Karens and karma comes knocking with federal badges. If you like this story, hit that like button, share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more HOA tales and real-life neighborhood drama each week.